Let me ask you something, and I want you to be totally honest with yourself here. Have you ever found yourself completely stuck, just obsessively replaying a decision you think you should have made? Maybe you let go of a relationship, passed on a career opportunity, or maybe you just played it a little too safe when you really should have taken a risk. And now, that one single choice keeps looping in your head like a broken record. Listen, if you're nodding right now, I really want you to know you aren't alone. This painful experience of regret, it's deeply human. Our brains are literally hardwired to do this, especially when a decision was personal, totally in our control, and the outcome is, well, incredibly final.
There's this thought from a Reddit self-care community that hits the nail on the head. It says the more we regret something, the more we romanticize the alternative, even though it's just a fantasy. You see, psychologists call this counterfactual thinking. Our brains just love imagining alternate realities. And when we make a choice that doesn't quite pan out, it is so easy to look at the path we didn't take and imagine it as this perfectly paved road with absolutely zero problems. But as the community rightly points out, that's a total illusion. It's just a story we're making up in our heads.
But here's where things get really fascinating. We can actually take all that messy emotional pain and translate it into a simple, highly effective data collection process using game theory. It's a concept called counterfactual regret. In computer science, especially when solving complex games with imperfect information, like poker, counterfactual regret is literally just a math equation. It's the calculated difference in the expected payoff between the action you could have taken versus the action you actually took. But notice the absolute most important part of this definition: it's used to update future strategy. Algorithms don't use regret to beat themselves up. They use it as pure, unfiltered mathematical data to learn how to play the game better the next time around.
To really shake off the shame of making a wrong choice, I want you to picture your life as a massive game tree. Imagine every single decision you make as a node on this tree, branching out into the completely unknown. Life is an imperfect information game. When you're standing at a node, forced to make a choice, you literally cannot see the end of the branch. You can't see the leaves until you actually get there. You have to make strategic moves without knowing what cards life is holding and without knowing what's going to happen next.
And this is beautifully illustrated when we look at how advanced neural networks tackle this exact same problem. They use something called deep counterfactual regret minimization. In insanely massive games, like heads-up poker, which has over 1 trillion possible nodes, older algorithms had to kind of manually group situations together just to comprehend the game. But newer systems use deep neural networks to approximate complex strategy choices across the entire game. The system takes in the imperfect information, like the cards on the board and the betting history, and runs it through its layers to figure out the advantages for each possible action. It processes all this data to find an optimal equilibrium, and it does it completely devoid of any emotional baggage.
Okay, so let's break down how this algorithm actually works, because it builds an incredible framework for decision-making. First, it traverses a sample of the game tree. Second, it calculates the instantaneous regret for the actions it took. Third, it updates its memory with this new data. But please pay close attention to step 4. It uses a process called regret matching, which mathematically means it entirely discards negative regrets. If a past action was a terrible move, the algorithm just logs a 0 for it. That's it. It doesn't dwell, it doesn't cry. It zeroes it out and focuses its energy purely on the positive regrets, the actions that actually offer strategic value for the future.
So here is the absolute core of the issue. Look at the stark contrast between these two approaches. Machine regret treats mistakes as pure, helpful data meant to optimize future nodes, gracefully dropping the negative baggage. Human regret, though, we use it as emotional punishment. We experience regret as this massive, complex strategic failure, and our brains stubbornly hold on to these unhelpful, obsessive loops. We dwell on past outcomes that we literally can't change, completely wasting our cognitive computing power on nodes of the game tree that are already miles behind us. Listen, if you are stuck in one of those loops right now, I need to remind you, as a friend and your psychologist for this explainer, that the unchosen path you keep romanticizing is just a fantasy. Remember what we said about counterfactual thinking? Because life is an imperfect information game, you actually have zero idea what was waiting for you at the end of that other branch. That alternative reality would have inevitably brought its own entirely new set of problems, roadblocks, and unpredictable variables. You are comparing your real, flawed current life to a perfectly curated fictional ideal. And honestly, that's an incredibly unfair comparison to make against yourself. Which brings us to one of my absolute favorite concepts, algorithmic self-forgiveness.
Look, an AI doesn't hate itself when it loses a hand of poker, right? It recognizes that it made a probabilistic calculation based on the limited data it had at that exact moment. Real self-forgiveness comes from realizing you did exactly the same thing. You made the best possible move you could with the imperfect information, the emotional maturity, and the resources you had at that specific node in your life. You couldn't see the hidden cards. You couldn't predict the future. You have to forgive yourself for not having perfect information.
All right, how do we actually debug our own brains and reframe these regrets into productive lessons? Here is a practical, step-by-step guide. Step 1, recognize the fantasy. Catch yourself the second you start romanticizing that unchosen path. Step 2, accept what is. You literally cannot traverse backward up the game tree. Step 3, focus on what is in your control right now. What nodes are actually available to you from your current position. And step 4, extract the lesson for the next decision node. Just like the AI updates its advantage memory, you take the data from your mistake to make a much smarter choice next time. To really hardwire this into your daily routine, I highly suggest adopting these specific actionable habits. Whenever you catch that "I should have thought" creeping in, physically pause, stop, and shift your internal dialogue to, okay, what can I learn from this? Practice forgiving yourself daily for not being a mind reader. Stop leaking your precious cognitive energy into the past and deliberately save that resource to brainstorm how to navigate forward. Let go of the illusion that it could have been different, because once we accept what actually is, we can finally move forward. To wrap up this whole therapeutic mental model, I want you to remember this simple rule. Use regret as a teacher, not a punishment. Regret doesn't mean you're a failure. It's merely a biological signal that your brain is processing new data. It's a tool designed by nature to improve your future strategic choices. When you finally drop the emotional punishment and just look at the math, you free yourself to play the game of life so much more effectively. I'm going to leave you with one final, provocative thought to chew on. Think about your absolute biggest regret, the one that still keeps you up at night. If you strip away all the shame, all the guilt, and all the fantasies about what could have been, what is the most valuable piece of data hidden inside of it? Go find that data. Update your strategy and confidently traverse your game tree moving forward.